All right, folks, welcome to Ninoscorner.tv. I'm joined with James Robbins, a best-selling author, I could say. This book is something else. It's called "Blowing Up Everything is Beautiful, Beautiful: Israel's Extermination of Gaza." James Robbins is an award-winning journalist and historian. His work has appeared in The Guardian, Times, a literary supplement, and Spectator. Current Affairs, The New Statesman. He is a former managing editor of the 𝗵𝗃.org and the creator of The Great Crime, a podcast history of the American genocide. He lives in London. James, thanks for joining me, man. This is going to be interesting because a lot of controversy surrounding Gaza right now.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And folks, get your noble gold. Get your noble gold. Here's the hard truth. Every 6 years, your dollar loses half its buying power. That's that 100,000 in savings today could feel like 50,000 by 2031, but there's a way to protect and preserve your money, and that is gold and silver. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy to own gold or silver. No pressure, no call centers, just honest one-on-one support. Open a qualified account and get a free 10-ounce silver American flag bar. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com now, folks, and get started on getting some gold. All right, James. Thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. This is a hot topic, right? There's a lot of controversy surrounding this. And to me, I feel war crimes are being committed, okay? It's obvious. The bombing of Gaza, the starving out the people, it's very obvious to anybody watching this what this is. How do you want to start this off? It started off October 7th, 2023. Paragliders just happened to, bust through the Iron Dome, penetrate the Iron Dome, and attack Israelis. How many people were killed there? 1,000? Was it 1,000?
About 1,200, yeah.
It seems to me like that was the perfect excuse used to go in and take out Gaza. To me, I feel like it's a big land deal, a big real estate grab. What's your thoughts on all this? How do you want to kick this off?
Well, I think the good place to start would be the situation of Gaza right this second.
Okay.
So essentially, the 80% of Gaza itself, the entire strip, 80% of the strip is under either evacuation orders. So the Israeli military has told the civilians of Gaza to leave to two particular zones. There are parts of Gaza City itself, which is closer to the north of the strip, and a place called 𝗵𝗄𝗎, which is on the Mediterranean coast. And that's 20% of the strip that is left for civilians to, we don't want to say live in because it's not really a survival. They are surviving, hanging on by their fingernails. 80% of the strip is either occupied or under evacuation orders. Entire cities have been razed to the ground. Rafah in the south of the Gaza Strip simply no longer exists at all. The Israelis are beginning offensive operations against a place called 𝗬𝗶𝗱, which was one of the few sort of refuges, for the most part, for the greater course of this war. Still had some hospitals functioning, still had some basic infrastructure. The IDF is going in there now. Khan Yunis, another city, is being razed to the ground. The Jabalia refugee camp, Bet Hanun, Bet Jabalia, they are gone, just completely razed from the earth. There have been a couple of press flights that have managed to fly over Gaza in the last couple of days, and we're seeing footage from the air for the first time in a very, very long time. It looks like Mars. It looks like the surface of Mars.
Look at this.
There's nothing there.
You could see the pictures, correct?
Yeah, there's even more recent pictures than this, taken from the air from cargo flights. And there's been press photographers on board. Yeah.
There's no different than just hitting it with a nuclear bomb. Look at that.
Yeah, the total amount of explosives that the IDF has dropped on Gaza is probably worth more than a few nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons at this point. But that doesn't fit with the MO to just nuke Gaza, right?
So how much of Gaza is wiped out right now? Did you say 80%, or was that as many people need to evacuate? How much of Gaza is gone, leveled?
It's really difficult to say. Like 90% of Gaza's housing stock, so the apartment buildings, the homes, the sort of farming villages, has been deliberately demolished or been destroyed in airstrikes. When an IDF unit enters an area and they clear it of Hamas fighters, they will go through systematically using controlled demolition charges, shape charges, and bulldozers to bring down entire civilian areas. The bulldozer is as much a weapon of this war as a bomb or a missile or a tank shell or an artillery piece. And when they are done demolishing entire districts, entire neighborhoods, they will move on to the next one. And this has been done systematically throughout the entirety of the Strip. And it's not only homes, it's agricultural land as well. Part of the reason that, Gaza, even before the war, couldn't feed itself. It didn't have enough arable farmland in order to produce enough food, enough crops for the entire population. It had to import food from Israel on the terms that the Israelis set. But it's exacerbated.
Israel always controlled Gaza. They always had
since 1967. Yeah, since the victory in the 1967 war, they've essentially been an occupying power in Gaza, and the fact of the occupation was part of a judgment at the International Court of Justice earlier late last year, in which the ICJ ruled that.
Let me just say this. This is actually before pictures of Gaza. Look at this. Before it was destroyed.
That looks like it's slightly afterwards, but I'm sure it's a lot less than that now. I mean, there's a lot less, buildings.
Well, this is before.
Left standing.
Right? Yeah. Look at that. It's a beautiful city. It's beautiful. I would have thought Gaza was always looked terrible, but to me, this looks like a very beautiful.
Sure. I mean, it doesn't need to look beautiful. It doesn't need to look ugly. It doesn't justify what the IDF has done to it, right? I mean, there's parts of the Mediterranean coast, especially around the Corniche, that were really beautiful. I mean, it looks like Italy or Spain or Cyprus, and all of it's gone.
Wow, just completely destroyed.
So there are now, as I said before, there's 20% of the territory is technically what the Israelis call a safe zone, although the Israeli Air Force strikes it all the time. So that's parts of Gaza City, which is the largest sort of urban area. And then there's parts on the coast called 𝗬𝗏𝗶𝗋, which from the very, very beginning, since October of 2023, has been a designated humanitarian area. And it's completely overcrowded. I mean, around 2 million, probably slightly less now. 2 million people, which is the pre-war population, are expected to cram into 20% of the entire.
Wow. Now it's said that this is a huge land grab. Israel wants the land, the real estate grab. They're going to build a canal through there. Are any of these theories correct? Or any of these rumors or alleged?
Sure. I mean, there's some say that there's massive gas deposits somewhere off the shore of the Gaza Strip. It's hard to say if that is the motivation. They've not made that clear, whereas they have made their motivations in other areas extremely clear. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, he's been the prime minister of Israel for a very, very long time, and he's sort of posed along the way as being a sort of right-wing figure, center-right. Since December of 2022, when the Israelis had their last election, Netanyahu went into coalition government with two parties. They're called Religious Zionism and Jewish Power, led by 𝗬𝗏𝗶𝗹 and Bezalel Smotrich. Some of your viewers might have heard of these people, seen them speak, or heard what they have to say. Basically, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are holding the government hostage, really. They're holding Netanyahu hostage. If Smotrich or Ben-Gvir disagree with anything that Netanyahu does, they can withdraw from the coalition, they collapse the government. There will have to be new elections called. Netanyahu goes away to prison for life on corruption charges. Because, meanwhile, as Gaza is being destroyed, Netanyahu is literally on trial. He appears in court most weeks on charges of corruption.
It doesn't seem like he's worried at all. Otherwise, he would stop.
He's extremely worried. I mean, if the war ends, if there's a negotiated settlement and elections are called within Israel,
hold on, so he
goes to prison, probably.
He needs to perpetuate this war.
Arguably, yeah.
And so is that why Iran was part of this?
Look, in the dying days of the Biden administration, you had senior members of his foreign policy team, thinking of people like Brett McGurk and Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, who were saying, look, the war on Gaza is allowing Israel, and therefore by proxy us, or the United States rather, to reshape the Middle East in our favor. Now, the last time they tried to do that was in 2001 and in 2003 with Afghanistan and Iraq, and look how that went. I think, with Iran, I'm not an Iran guy. It's not my area of expertise. But the matter of Iran's nuclear weapons program, look, it would seem to me that Iran has an obligation to get a nuclear weapon because it's the only defense, it's the only guarantee of independence from American aggression. If you don't have a nuclear weapon, then America or its proxies, for example Israel, will bomb you at will. Look at it the other way. North Korea got its own nuclear weapon. It will never be touched again. So a nuclear weapon is a kind of protection, and so they're using this chaos and this confusion, this calculated chaos and confusion, and the open justification of Iran's nuclear program in order to try and effect a kind of regime change. But Iran's a really, really big country. A lot of people don't realize this. Very, very old country with a lot of very, very proud people who live there. And you can't effect regime change by airstrike. It doesn't work like that.
So, are any of Israel's war aims legitimate? Are we witnessing the end of international law here?
Sure. I mean, look, we've all heard in the mainstream media when any representative of Israel will go on TV, they'll say, look, Israel's true purpose here in waging this campaign in Gaza is one, to free the hostages, and two, is to end Hamas's rule, is to end Hamas as a political force and as a military force. Now, let's take these claims one by one. What about the hostages? Look, in 22 months of combat, the IDF has rescued 8 hostages by military
How many
force.
in 22 months of combat? 8 hostages?
8. Just 8 rescued by military
And
force.
do they even know where the hostages are? Because it looks like they're mindlessly just blowing things up here. I mean, they could have killed some of the hostages.
Sure, and they more than likely have.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, the Israelis, the IDF, or the Israeli Air Force rather, developed a very, very specific technique of bombing Hamas's tunnels, which meant that it created the bomb blast created a kind of asphyxiating gas in order to close the entrances to the tunnels and all exits and escapes, and essentially trap the people in the tunnels in there with this gas, and it would suffocate them and kill them. And there's evidence that Hamas fighters and senior commanders have been killed using this particular method. And by the way, alongside only rescuing 8 hostages in 22 months of combat, they also killed 3 more of their own. This happened quite early on in the campaign. 3 guys, shirtless, waving a white flag and speaking Hebrew, and the IDF unit who was nearby shot them. Because that's how the infantry operates within Gaza. They shoot on sight and ask questions later. And the report that was written after this incident, in which these 3 Israeli hostages were shot by their own side, it was found that the soldiers disobeyed a direct ceasefire order from their own commander. So, 8 hostages rescued by military action, 3 more shot by their own side. How many were saved, were freed by negotiation and by ceasefire? It's 140. I think that's 14 times that number. So the only reliable method that Israel has for getting back the hostages it claims it cares about so much is negotiation and by an arranged ceasefire with the Palestinian representatives in Gaza, which is Hamas, the political party. Now, we take the other part of that formula about the war aims. We want to get rid of Hamas as a political and military force. Okay, in the ceasefire negotiations, Hamas have said repeatedly, we will either give up power to a technocratic Arab committee, or we will give up power to the Fatah party, which rules the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, as it's called. They've said this multiple times. Netanyahu has refused both of these offers. So if the war isn't being made to get the hostages back, if the war is not to see the end of Hamas as a political and military force, then what is the war for? I would argue that it's a war of extermination. It's a war of annihilation.
Right. So what's to stop them here? I mean, it seems to me the dominance. This is about superiority and dominance. I mean, they're going to take out Gaza. What's next? I mean, they've already gone to war with Iran. We backed them completely. Trump, backed him 100% on that one. But now, and they said they call it the 12-day war. It supposedly ended. I feel like this is just the beginning. Am I right in saying that?
You're right in some ways. I mean, the future is being rehearsed here. The Israelis, well, the only thing that can stop the Israeli government, the one thing, proven thing that can stop them, is the United States government, is the American president putting in a phone call and saying, stop this now. And if you don't stop it, we will cut off all weapon supplies to Israel. Look, Israel wouldn't have been able to fight for more than a month if the United States hadn't been supplying heavy weaponries. So that's the bombs, that's the missiles, that's the tank shells, and the artillery shells as well,
So
and
we
a
could
bunch of
say
other equipment as well.
so we could say we're against it all we want, but we're still supplying them with everything.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people who are very outraged about what's going on in Gaza are using the word complicity to describe what the American government, the British government, and the German government, and to some extent the European Union are doing. I think complicity is too weak a word here. These powers are collaborators. They are willing participants and partners in the total extermination of one part of the Palestinian population. It doesn't get more clear than that.
And the only way that Benjamin Netanyahu can avoid war crimes or going to trial for this is to perpetuate the war, to keep it going. He needs to keep this going.
Yeah, in a really perverted kind of way. Though there are other methods that are being tried in order to keep Benjamin Netanyahu out of prison. Not just prison in Israel on his corruption charges, but prison in The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. Now, this is slightly confusing. These are two different institutions. There's the International Court of Justice, which is a very, very old institution. It was set up in the wake of the First World War. And then there's the International Criminal Court, which was started in the late 90s or early 2000s. And that was part of the... it's done a couple of trials, usually sort of African despots and authoritarian leaders who have committed major crimes. Israel has been insulated from being called to account for its occupation of Palestinian territories, and not just Gaza, but the West Bank as well. It's been insulated from the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice by the United States. The United States not only supplies the weapons and provides diplomatic support, it sort of acts as a legal linebacker as well. So if you remember back to, I think it was November of 2024, when the International Criminal Court, the prosecutor there, issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant was the defense minister during the early part of the war. During the ceasefire period at the beginning of this year, he was replaced with a guy called Israel Katz, who looks like either Bert or Ernie from Sesame Street. I forget which one. He has, the horrible eyebrows, right?
Yeah.
So when the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court issued these arrest warrants, it was a major sort of, you were crossing the Rubicon, really, because nothing like this had ever been done before. And it meant that the Israelis and the Americans, so far as we know, have essentially gone to war with the International Criminal Court.
Right.
There is a massive shadow campaign going on now that has its public aspects, which is direct sanctions on the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, a guy called Karim Khan. And then there's a sort of intelligence war, if you like, of blackmail, sabotage, direct threats on staff at the International Criminal Court.
You want to touch on the Epstein stuff with this?
Sure. I mean,
how's your view of how Trump is handling this? I mean, Trump campaigned on we're going to end all the wars. We're not going to, and what's happening right now is we're funding Ukraine. We're now having we're about to have a nuclear standoff with Russia. It seems we're sending nuclear subs onto their coast, and this war with Gaza has not ended. In fact, we're continuously funding it, and we've helped them with Iran. So what's your opinion of Trump and how he's handling this?
Of Epstein or of the?
We'll get into that next. Let's go there, and then we'll go right into there.
Trump's handling. I mean, I don't think it's to Trump's credit that he is behaving exactly like Joe Biden did.
Right.
Oh. I mean, is there a man that Trump hates more in this world than Joe Biden? Probably. Maybe former editor of Vanity Fair, Graydon Carter. I mean, I don't know. But if he hates Joe Biden, I mean, for good reasons, then if he hates him so much, why is he acting exactly as Joe Biden did when he was in office, as regards Gaza specifically? That's a pretty terrible black mark on Donald Trump's name, along with all of the other black marks that come after his name,
And
for all of the other hideous things he's done.
so what about, okay, now let's segue into the Epstein stuff. Do you think this all is playing a part with that?
I don't know. There's no conclusive evidence. I mean, I saw Tucker Carlson saying that we should be saying outright that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. I mean, the evidence for this is really circumstantial, and I think it matters to be factual about this stuff. If there is a Mossad connection at all, it was through Ghislaine Maxwell, through her father, who was, almost buried with full military honors with Israeli ministers and senior politicians by his graveside, which is kind of extraordinary. So I don't know that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. The strongest evidence that we had that he was an intelligence agent or officer at all came from, of course, from Alex Acosta, who said during the time when Epstein was being prosecuted in Florida, we can't touch him, he belongs to intelligence. And there are a very, very large number of people who are included in that unindicted co-conspirator list. And probably one of those names should be Donald Trump, right? I mean, he is as involved in this as Bill Clinton is.
Let's go to October 7th, 2023. Hamas attacks Israel. Do you believe the official narrative, or do you believe this was an Israeli intelligence attack on itself? I kind of go back to 9/11. I look at both things here and I think, there's a lot of resemblance here. It gave them the reason to go in and attack Gaza. Do you believe the official narrative?
Look, I don't know if we can quite say that October 7th was a kind of Reichstag fire sort of situation. What we can say is that there are a lot of very, very horrible things, and we should be really careful about the facts here.
Okay.
So of that, I think it's 1,200 people were killed on October 7th itself, Israelis.
It was a festival, right? Wasn't it like a music festival that they attacked?
Yeah, so there's the Nova Music Festival, which is one of the areas that Hamas attacked, and there was, I think, 1/3 of the civilian casualties that day took place at Nova Festival alone. But when this talking point is talked about, it's usually said, well, 1,200 or 1,500 civilians were killed that day. That's not quite true. A large proportion of the casualties that day were police officers and IDF members. So the Hamas, in its planning and in carrying out the attacks, it was sort of part counterforce in the sense that they attacked military installations as well as police stations and things like that. But they also attacked civilian targets as well. So it was part counterforce, part pogrom in a sense. And Hamas have no shame about saying we were very deliberate about targeting Israeli civilians. And they don't need to hide that fact. They're quite capable of making their own decisions and planning their own operations.
So you're saying there's enough proof here to say that Hamas actually did this. This wasn't orchestrated by Israel to give them a reason to go in and wipe out Gaza?
Sure. There's no evidence that it was a false flag, right?
Okay.
But I think even more ugly is the fact that, and 𝗀𝗏𝗃, the former defense minister, has admitted this, the Israelis have a thing called the Hannibal Directive. You may have heard of it, in which to avoid any member of Israeli society, especially a soldier, being taken prisoner, being taken hostage, the Israelis will fire upon the people trying to take them prisoner, even if it risks killing that potential hostage, right? So this Hannibal Directive allows the IDF, allows the military to essentially kill their own civilians. And that's a really deeply, deeply ugly kind of situation that they allow themselves to get into. And there is some evidence of the fact that the Hannibal Directive was employed on October 7th. So there was, large convoys on the roads of people, what looks like people fleeing from the sites that were penetrated by Hamas. There's some evidence that helicopter gunships were used to strafe those columns and those convoys of fleeing Israeli civilians. A lot of this stuff is very, very heavily suppressed in Israel. I mean, their military censorship regime is quite strict, which is why we still don't really know how effective or damaging Iran's counter-battery fire was during their sort of exchanges of salvos earlier this year. There's some hints and rumors that Parts of IDF headquarters was quite badly damaged. Their intelligence department was quite badly damaged. But we don't know for certain. And I think there's plenty of other things to talk about here. There's plenty of other crimes and hideous things that we need to object to and protest without sort of speculating about other areas that we don't really know much about.
Right. We can't really prove it. So what's really the end game here, man? I mean, what's the end game for this? What's the blueprint here for taking out Gaza, in your opinion? What is the blueprint for taking out Gaza? What's the end game?
About 3 months ago, I'd noticed something about the early planning stages of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You may have heard of this. There's sort of these militarized aid sites, three of which are in the south of the Gaza Strip, on the ruins of what was the city of Rafah. And then there's another one slightly further north, around a place called 𝗫𝗎𝗓, which is the sort of the belt around Gaza's waist, really. It's a corridor that the Israelis use to control movement, not only their own movement, but also the movement of civilians as well. I noticed that all of these aid sites were planned for the south of the Strip, and that concurrent military evacuations from the north and the center of Gaza would mean that a whole bunch of people, most of Gaza's population, would end up in the south, concentrated, 2 million people concentrated around the only place that they were able to get aid. And that was aid provided to them on the sort of toleration of the Israelis. And to do that, they had to destroy, in order for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to function, the Israelis had to destroy the old aid distribution network, which is run by the United Nations through its UN Relief and Works Agency. 400 sites throughout the entirety of the Gaza Strip. All of those have been shut down. The UN agencies, the aid charities, all humanitarian groups, no longer allowed to operate and provide aid to the civilian population. It all has to come from the GHF. Now, when I noticed this, I sort of started writing a piece about it and trying to point out that in combination with a thing called the Voluntary Emigration Bureau, which is a new sort of Israeli agency, if you like. It's part of the Defense Ministry. And that's to facilitate the removal of pretty much everybody from the Gaza Strip, all Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, or as many as they can get rid of. They're going to deport them to sort of third countries.
Well, didn't Trump say he wanted to send them into Egypt and
Sure.
Libya or places like that? He wanted to send the refugees out, right?
Egypt, Libya, Indonesia, Sudan,
But Benjamin
Qatar. Yeah.
Netanyahu didn't want that. I think he
Yeah.
wants to exterminate them all, correct?
No, he does. He does, at least publicly anyway, want to facilitate some kind of what he calls voluntary emigration. And this is a phrase that the Israelis used, voluntary emigration, but it's a euphemism, right? I mean, some of you may remember back to there was a big conference in January of 2024 when all of the settlers, the big settler movement in Israel, had a big conference in Jerusalem. And there was a guy there from the Israeli government. He was the communications minister. His name was Shlomo Karhi. He got up on the stage in front of all of his friends and colleagues and comrades, and he said, "We must demand the voluntary emigration of the entire Palestinian population of Gaza." And he didn't really need to explain what he meant by voluntary emigration, but he did so anyway. And he said, voluntary, and this is a quote because it's seared into my brain, "Voluntary is a state that you impose on someone until they give their consent."
Right.
Now, what he's describing there is essentially torture. I'm going to torture you until you do what I want you to.
Twist your arm just until you say uncle.
Exactly. Or withhold all aid for 11 weeks, which is what the Israelis did. They imposed a total siege between, I think it was March through June, 11 weeks, in which, the world hasn't seen urban hunger this extreme and concentrated
Right.
since
So
the siege of Leningrad ended.
the humanitarian efforts taking place right now are really just like zero.
They're extremely limited. I mean, even in the early planning stages of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
They're purposely starving them out.
Essentially, yeah. For the duration of this war, the Israelis have essentially been counting calories for the Palestinians, right? They only allow the amount of food that they want to let in. And so that means that essentially for the better part of 2 years, almost 3 years, the Palestinians have been on a starvation diet controlled by Israel. It's extremely deliberate. It's extremely systematic. And, along with the bombing and the home demolition and the destruction of agricultural land and the destruction of cultural objects as well, like Gaza had some really, really beautiful sort of things that dated back into antiquity, sort of Greek era harbors, the ruins of Greek
I
era
had no
harbors.
idea it was
And
so beautiful.
yeah,
I've never really looked at Gaza, but I see the before and after pictures. I can't believe how beautiful a place it was.
yeah. Museums, cinemas, theaters, bookstores, mosques, churches as well, all just completely vanished, except for the churches. I mean, the Catholic Church is still quite powerful, and they tend to kick up a bit of a stink whenever their bits of property are struck. I mean, it was quite a rare thing. There was a strike that was quite near a Catholic church recently, and Benjamin Netanyahu had to make a public statement about this and apologize, which is not a thing that the Israelis do often.
No.
But yeah, all of this is gone. There's nowhere safe or secure or warm to live. There's no power. There's no potable water. There's no regular supply of food. The hospitals are being shut down one by one, bombed deliberately. Yeah, this is every part of this is extremely deliberate and systematic.
It would have seemed that yeah, Iran was next, right? And then Trump, did he stop it? He called it the 12-day war, right? And he says it's over now. We hit him with uh, bunker bombs. Can we expect something else to transpire from this? There's supposedly a regime change happening now within Iran. What can we expect next? What do you see happening next, James? I mean, what's the next logical step for Israel and for Trump?
For Trump, I mean, here's the tricky thing about Trump is that he poses as an anti-establishment candidate and an anti-establishment president. He is, of course, completely of the establishment. He is amongst his own class.
Well, everything with
That's
Israel
always
shows you're
been
right. I can't defend that, and I'm a Trump supporter, whatever. But I cannot defend what you're saying.
sure. But there are parts of him that are kind of a little bit maverick, and there are
Right.
things that offend his own ego, his own sense of himself, right? And I think he really does have a kind of sort of semi-sentimental objection to suffering. He doesn't like to see it. It doesn't mean that he necessarily has to have an ounce of care at all for the Palestinians. He doesn't have to have that. He just doesn't have to want to look at pictures of starving people that his advisors bring to him every single day. And so, in that sense, when I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your show.
Oh yeah, have fun.
Okay. Well, of
Let
course,
it rip, baby.
we remember when Trump had that impromptu press conference. I think under the rotor blades of Marine One,
Yeah, yeah.
around the time of this exchange of missiles between Israel and Iran, and he says they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Right.
He was kind of pissed off in a really surprising way, surprising to me at least. But he sort of breached a little bit of a taboo here, which is that you don't criticize Israel in public, and he did do that. He said they don't know what the fuck they're doing. So I don't know. Trump may surprise us yet, and if
I
the
think he's going
cost
to.
if the cost is if the price of saving Palestinian lives is to massage Trump's ego and to massage his vanity, sure, I'll take that cost. If that's the price that it comes in at, I'll allow that. I'll be okay with that. But look, he has his special advisor, diplomatic envoy Steve Witkoff, who has been shuttling around since the end of January now, trying to get a peace accord together, but doesn't seem to realize that he has the power and the capacity to say to the Israelis, "Stop this, or we cut off your arms."
Right.
Excuse me, the weapons,
Right,
not
right.
hands and legs. If we cut off your military aid unless you stop this right this second. And it's an interesting sort of counterexample with the Prime Minister here in Britain, Keir Starmer, who said he sort of conditioned recognition of the state of Palestine on the Israelis upholding a ceasefire. And if they don't uphold a ceasefire come September, then the United Kingdom, France, and Canada will recognize the state of Palestine. Palestine. This is
Right.
they think that they're being strong. It's incredibly weak. It's
Right.
incredibly weak. There's no leverage here. There's no force that's being applied. There's no, as you said before, there's no arm twisting going on whatsoever. And the only people really who can twist the arm enough for the Israelis to pay attention is the United States.
You know what is horrific to me is the only way Bibi Netanyahu can stay out of trouble is for millions to die. That's insane to think about.
It's grotesque.
It's
Look, I mean,
absolutely evil. It's evil.
yeah, I think what we're seeing, the systematic nature of what we're seeing at the moment, licenses us to use that word. I mean, it's horrifically grotesque.
Demonic.
And you asked before, like, what's in store in the future, and I think really the Israelis and their sort of their political messianism, their willingness to conquer land so as to set up the conditions in which they can bring forth the apocalypse, which is what they believe. Maybe not
Which I
Netanyahu,
wanted to
but
talk about.
um,
Which I wanted to talk about with you. I know
sure.
you didn't want to touch on it, but I was saying they're kind of trying to fulfill prophecy here.
Yeah, sure. This is it's not a particularly large movement within Israel, but it's a defined political tendency. We often see pictures of these, videos from the hilltops of the West Bank, around Hebron and Jenin and places like this. There was a documentary film that was made that won the Oscar for Best Documentary at the beginning of this year. It was called No Other Land. It's about a village called Masafiyata, in which these Palestinian villages, these farming communities, are daily set upon by these settlers who move into Palestinian land illegally, occupy it, and force out the native population, the indigenous population. So these settlers, their political leaders are these guys, 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗹 Ben-Gvir and 𝗵𝗲𝗇 Smotrich. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are the political leadership within the Israeli parliament. And as I said before, they are in the driver's seat here. And they are completely open and honest about what they want to do and what they are doing. They will tell you what no other sort of seasoned centrist or right-wing politician will do. They don't give sort of caged or canned answers. They say exactly what they mean to do.
Well, this is the big divide, even with the podcasters. Is there's a lot on the left side of the line and the right side of the line that are talking about conservative podcasters that are that will not give their support to Israel. You got like Candace Owens and all them criticizing Trump, and then you got others that are taking the side of Trump. There's a huge divide right now within the conservative movement. You got people like Dan Bongino giving his unfailing support to Israel, Hegseth, Charlie Kirk. I mean, all of these right-wing conservative just blindly giving faith and support to Israel. I'm the opposite. I'm saying no, 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 no. Let's look at all things here, and I actually do agree with you. So, what's your opinion on that? Just the unfailing support of Israel amongst these conservative podcasters. Do they really believe this? Are they being paid to say this stuff? What's your thoughts on this?
Look, the Israelis have a sort of propaganda method which they call hasbara. You may have heard
Yes,
that
I've heard
term
of it.
before. Um, it doesn't always necessarily mean money is changing hands. It's influence and it's pressure and it's taking up public space with the talking points that you want to get across. Look, nobody has been more surprised than me about the split within the conservative American conservative movement that you describe. And to some extent, it's slightly replicated within the conservative movement in Britain as well. There are a lot of sort of very establishment figures, old Tories, if you like, sort of aristocratic caricatures, if you like, who are objecting and objecting quite strongly. Two examples, right? So Tucker Carlson, who I don't think is a dum-dum, like I think he's quite a smart guy. Some sort of I wouldn't say an idol, but a sort of a guy who I learned a lot from is Christopher Hitchens, and he knew Tucker Carlson back in the 90s and said, Tucker, don't ever go into television. And that is, well, look how that's turned out.
Right.
So Tucker isn't an idiot. He knows what's going on. And so I think his objection to the destruction of Gaza is more ideological, shall we say, that it's come from a position of principles as well as practical politics, and that in the sense that he can always be slightly contrarian and on the outside. But then you look at somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and is a chancer and is an opportunist who is coming out quite vociferously against Gaza. Where was she 21 months ago when when we were already on this trunk line towards extermination? Where was she then? The only I have to say for my own side, we on the left have been the only people consistently in the streets, getting our heads kicked in by the cops, being arrested, being spat on, being sent to ICE facilities in Louisiana, on behalf of the Palestinians and on behalf of all humanity who doesn't want this to continue. So I suppose we can welcome in these conservatives who are finally seeing the light on this
Well, I
stuff.
mean,
But I feel a little bit defensive here, and not without reason.
and you're on a conservative channel right now. How do you feel about that?
Sure. Look, I was about to say, the greater chunk of press that I've done for this book, the interviews and appearances that I've done, like this one, have been for more conservative-leaning publications.
Well, I got to commend you on coming on my platform. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I really thank you. You see people like you see the riffs that happen, like Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. Man, they really went at it, right? And that's kind of what's happening right now. Israel is like that line in the sand right now for a lot of people that have a conscience. Like I have a conscience, and I look at this and I go, I can't stand by this. Nobody wants to see millions of people. How many people have been taken out? Hundreds of thousands, or is it a million now? But they can't see these people die. So yeah, this is a big line in the sand, even with conservatives.
And it's interesting really because it's sort of long overdue in a way, because if you remember back to the 2000s, the war on terror, this is what neoconservatism has gifted to us. It gifted us 20 years of constant conflict all over the globe, a intensely militarized society in the United States, to a quite extraordinary degree, to a kind of draconian degree, to like a lot of other Western nations, I suppose. But the United States is a surveillance society. Your phone really is listening to you.
Oh, 100%.
That's
And
not a
now,
conspiracy
and
theory.
I told people, as we watched the pendulum swing so far to the left, now here we go. I'm watching it go. I'm watching it as we could see it go really, really far to the right, skip that middle ground, and seeing surveillance really pick up speed now with AI, Palantir, using problem reaction solution, the Hegelian dialect, where they just need they have the solution and they create the problem, right? So what we're seeing now with the illegal immigrants. Well, what's going to happen? Well, the big beautiful bill did bring in massive domestic military and mass surveillance, and that's going to be used on all Americans, not just illegal immigrants. So I'm watching this. Believe me, I kind of ride the fence here with all this. That's why I like to bring more people like you onto my platform, because I don't want to be an echo chamber.
Sure. Can I say one short thing
Sure.
on the surveillance stuff, or the use of technology? One of the methods that the IDF and the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Intelligence Department, the Army Intelligence Department, one of its methods for picking targets is to use AI. Now, I'm slightly skeptical about the use of the term AI here, because really it's just a kind of algorithm, right? It's just an algorithm to sort material faster than any human could. But they have three main programs. They're called Lavender, Gospel, and rather grotesquely, a program called Where's Daddy?
What?
And yeah, so it's called Where's Daddy? And what Where's Daddy does, if I remember this rightly, is it narrows down the home addresses of Hamas fighters and civil servants and politicians and commanders. And the program identifies when that target is at home, which is when the Air Force will drop a bomb. Now, when they're at home, that's guaranteed to mean that their wife, their brothers, their cousins, their children are going to be in that apartment block as well, right? So every single time that Where's Daddy is employed, it means civilian casualties. And look, I should just say that there's a difference here between targeted killing and deliberate killing, right? So Israel targets people deliberately all the time. They kill people who are innocent. They kill aid workers, they kill journalists, they kill medical personnel. All the time they do this. But the greater mass of casualties in Gaza have come from not necessarily targeted killing, but deliberate killing. And what I mean by this is that the Israeli Air Force sets its rules of engagement so that 20 or 30 civilians are allowed to be killed for every low-ranking Hamas fighter.
Wow.
If there is a senior Hamas commander, that figure goes up to 200 or 300 civilian casualties per strike. Now, to put this in context, every military in the world has a kind of a rule like this. The American military, when it went to go kill Osama bin Laden, it had a NCV, a non-combat casualty cutoff value of 30. So to take down the world's most notorious terrorist mastermind, the elite special forces of the United States allowed themselves to only kill 30 civilians. The Israelis allow themselves to do that for every single low-ranking member of Hamas that they can identify. This is why the death toll from the airstrikes are so high and so extreme, alongside the starvation and the disease and the lack of medical care and all the rest of it, as well as the psychological torture as well. I mean,
that's off the chart.
Yeah, I mean, the Israelis are creating...
These kids, that if there's a kid that survives this, they're traumatized or scarred the rest of their life.
Completely, yeah. And that's a sort of damage and pain and trauma that the world bears responsibility to mend, to fix. If there are any minds and people left to fix when this is all done.
James Robbins, folks. Blowing up everything is beautiful. Israel's extermination of Gaza. Where do people get this book?
Fine bookstores everywhere, online as well. Google Amazon. The title, it should be available. Yeah, Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon. So, okay. Wow. James, I appreciate you coming on the show. You're a brave guy. Especially you knew this was a conservative platform. You knew that coming in, right?
Yeah, sure.
Good. And I commend you for that. I hope my audience does. I hope you all really enjoyed this. I love to bring different perspectives on. That's the only way we get to the truth, man. That's the only way we do it. So thank you, James, for joining me.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Where do people find you? Is there social media platforms? What's your social media platforms?
For my sins, I'm still on Twitter, James_A_Robbins.
Okay.
And I also have a newsletter. It's called The Dreadnought, thedreadnought.news, and you can subscribe there.
Beautiful. Thanks, James. God bless you.
Thank you.